I just saw The Boy and the Heron, and I decided I wanted to talk about it as well. I don't think this is a movie I want to make a video essay about at this time, or rather, will not have the thoughts and emotions fully formed to talk about it in that way, maybe for at least a year's time. But I also did not want to talk about it off the cuff in a verbal stream of consciousness. So I wanted to collect my thoughts here on a page first, and verbalize that, as I think that it may more accurately depict what my inner feelings are towards this movie. I just feel so grateful to be alive for this, seeing Miyazaki, in his 80s, come out of retirement to make something that feels like a magnum opus. So many of his principles and artistic decisions of his entire body of work distilled into this new movie. I'll admit I watched it both completely engrossed in the film, but also with somewhat of a comfortable distance. I never felt as emotional, anxious, or entrenched into the characters as I have with some other films like Shinkai's Your Name. However, this film felt like a viewing experience I'm not sure I've ever really had before. It somewhat felt like floating in water to me. A lot of Miyazaki's work have non-linear progressions of logic or expectations based on what we see and expect in real life or in American films. For instance, when I first watched Spirited Away, I was so surprised to watch the monster at the bathhouse situation distill into him just sitting with Zero on the train, or the witch who I thought was a villain suddenly be endearingly called Granny. Sometimes in his movies, things progress less out of our typical logic and more so move with feeling, which I think is beautiful. And maybe at the very core of art itself, expressing these abstract feelings and experiences we have in life into not completely expected lines or events, into not completely expected lines of events in these dreamlike movies. This felt like such a step above that, and maybe dreamlike and abstract in the highest form yet of his entire body of work. I felt like I was floating because I soon felt swept away with the spiritual world of the movie. Not really expecting to get any answers or expectations for anything happening. It was an ever-changing and abstract as dreams are in real life. And knowing why anything is the way it was felt very far from the point. This made me feel how deeply psychedelic and humbling the universe and its origins are, as well as science, spirituality, and what we all imagine God and these astral planes of existence to be. It felt relaxing to just sit back and watch these characters march forward through this world and not really ask for any explanation and watch these characters march forward through this world and not really ask for any explanation for anything from anyone, but just watch them traverse the world and its inhabitants, and most of all, its power. I think because of the loose nature of this film, I was not able to latch my own personal emotions or vulnerabilities onto the characters or story as much as I was able to just admire it and think about a lot of things, and what they all mean to me. I too have lost a mother, and I too think a lot about time and space. The film Your Name by Shinkai emotionally wrecked me with its representations of time, space, and human inhabitation of these places. The idea of people and things across time still being connected. Seeing the boy interact with his mom from the past and have none of their conversations be wrapped up in any way in how is this happening? Do you remember me? And what's going to happen? Instead, in place of, I want you to be safe, I'm going to be so happy to have you, and I love you, was so beautiful to see. They were both mother and son, but also equals as souls and as friends. The film felt like it leveled what it meant to be family, older or younger, to be alive or dead. It somewhat distilled the general notion of existence into a pancake that exists in another space that you have to be humbled by. I wasn't a big fan of how I felt while watching Spirited Away. Not because of its quality, I think it's objectively a 10 out of 10 masterpiece work. But when I first watched it, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. and left feeling overwhelmed and stressed as I watched Zero struggle with nearly every scene and moment in the film. This felt different to me, and in some ways felt like the natural progression of Miyazaki making one of these dreamlike post-logical films. Joe Hisaishi was, and I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, Joe Hisaishi was at the top of his game, and the music elevated the film enormously. The color palette was fantastic and reminded me of The Wind Rises, and somewhat felt like the blue and daytime version of Spirited Away, which is a film that feels very red and nighttime to me. I'm very excited to rewatch this film and let it make me think about more things. I'm also really excited to watch it in English, as the Japanese version was fantastic, and I'm sure I'll get new things out of it by hearing it in my own language with such amazing actors. This feels like one of many very, very lucky moments in art I get to be here for. And I hope a lot of people go to see this film in theaters, an animated movie that may do more for adults than it does for kids. However, maybe that isn't true at all. I'm sure this film will impact kids very heavily. In fact, I now remember that during the movie, I very often was reminded of the third Pokemon movie and the world Entei created and the emotions that made me feel as a kid. And in some ways, this is the first time I think I've felt those very specific feelings again as an adult in a movie theater. I really recommend going to see The Boy and the Heron and having an open mind and maybe no expectations whatsoever.